I'm Anna, and I'm pleased to say that Loretta is sitting in. We're going to be doing these webinars together. The first two I'll deliver with Loretta's amazing support, and then the last two webinars will switch roles. I just quickly wanted to give you a bit of my background for those of you I haven't met and our paths haven't crossed. As you can tell probably from the picture, I've been doing tourism for quite some time. We're actually in my 52nd year. I started out my career essentially in Canada. So I'm partly Canadian as well as British. And I happened to be in Canada just when tourism was beginning. So the first few years, 20 years, if you like, were spent working in all aspects of tourism development, from an industry that didn't exist to one that has become really important in that part of the world. I then, from about 1993, I got very much involved in technology. Those of you may remember that the internet really came on board in 1992, 93. And I could see the potential. And I spent the next 10, 15 years working in technology, introducing the internet to destination systems around the world. I mention this because that's when I really began to understand our sector, tourism, not as an industry, but as a network. I learned a lot about networks, and at the same time, I had the good fortune to work with a lot of people, of indigenous people around the world. So those two experiences side by side really helped develop my current thinking. And then around 2013, I really started to focus in on what is the basis for regeneration, which is understanding that we are really all part of one big living system. So I'm going to now move the slides as fast as I... There we go. And in 2015, I brought all my thoughts together in this document. And I mention it because there's an awful lot of material that is foundational to regenerative thinking here. It has a very unusual title, Social Entrepreneurship in Tourism. Around 2015, social entrepreneurship was gaining attraction and attention. That business could do more than just make money. It could actually help improve people and places, and essentially do more good. So this goes back to 2015. And I really looked at tourism from the point of view of from that perspective. And I've just put up these slides because as we go along through this presentation and through the work that we'll be sharing with you, you'll see some kind of similarity of structure. But nearly all of the things that I'll be talking about today are actually in that document as well. So we might want to dig it up and have a look. But fundamentally, I was arguing that business as usual was neither possible nor desirable. This is back in 2015. That we had to shift our focus from just addressing symptoms, things like climate change, biodiversity loss, wealth disparities, etc., by looking at the real root cause. And that will be, again, a theme of the work today. The tourism is not just an assembly line, but actually a living system. That's another key point that we'll be making in these webinars. And that we have to shift it from being an extractive type of economy to a life-affirming regenerative economy. And that will involve our redefining success. What makes a success? Is it just more visitors, or is it the flourishing of all stakeholders? And that's another word that will reappear over and over again, this word flourishing. And then finally, what we know, I think, all of us around this electronic table, that the regenerative economy has to be done, worked out, expressed one place at a time. And it will be built from the ground up, community by community. That's why this particular program is so exciting. It's the first one of its kind in Europe. We're all working on the frontier. And I say that's important, but it's also important to be kind to one another. We're all trying to learn a lot of new things. And I'm hoping that what will come out of this is not just a lot of really good reports, excellent projects, even some regenerative experiences, but a true working, caring community of professionals in the Mediterranean, all helping each other move this powerful sector forward. So then I spent some time, starting around about that 2015, I had the opportunity to work with Flanders and really put some of these ideas that were in that document into effect. And that led to the Travel to Tomorrow program, which many of you have heard of. But the reason I mention it was, again, what we learned in that program project was just the power of community to take care of their own futures. I think our current economic and political system is extremely top down, where we have very detailed plans, we have programs, and you can see this even in the Interreg project itself. It's quite well conceived, it's very organized, but where the power is going to happen, where the creativity is going to emerge, where the sense of togetherness, of purpose is going to happen, is at the community level. And perhaps one of the first things I would ask you to do as participants in this program is to really think about, which communities are we going to work with in order to make this possible. So the Flanders work led to some other work in Europe. We worked with a region in Flanders called Mechelsland, another region in Scotland, Angus, and a region in Romania. And again, it was all working at the ground level with communities, really coming together to talk about what place meant to them, what they loved about their places, and what it would mean if they switched their whole purpose and focus to helping themselves as individuals, their businesses, and the people in their community, and the whole natural world in which that community was based, if they could help that or provide the conditions for that community to flourish. To me, that is the absolute hardcore essence of what regeneration is all about. So we've had some experience. Now, since then, since 2015, there has been literally an explosion of thinking and documents and thoughts all about regeneration. And that's very exciting. There's no shortage of things resources that you'll be able to dip into to learn. It also sometimes can be a bit overwhelming and a bit confusing, but I just put some of them up here. One of the things that we would like to do to help this process is, you will get a written copy of what I'm saying today, probably in the next few days, so that can easily be translated into whichever language you're most comfortable in. And also over time, we'll start sharing other resources that you may find helpful as you start your learning journey. So I just named some of these. I think the one project that really has brought regeneration to people's attention, it didn't start in tourism, obviously. It started probably in the built environment in planning, because one of our key sources of inspiration and guidance is the Regenesis group, and Oscar and Gerard are representing many of the, and so is Loretta, are one of the many practitioners who've studied under them. But what brought regeneration to the public awareness was probably the movement taking place in agriculture. And the film made in the United States called Kiss the Ground is one of the ones that has really sparked people's attention. So today I'm going to quickly talk about why my purpose today is to bring us to a shared understanding of why we're looking at regeneration, the relevance to tourism, and positioning tourism also within a much larger system. So let's very quickly look at tourism critically for a short while. I would argue that right now we're operating a flawed model, simply because the more successful we are, the more it seems to hurt. Over-tourism is the inevitable result of attracting more and more people into a confined space, more space than that space was originally designed to hold. It's quite basic. So we're seeing it on the top of the Chinese Wall on holidays. We're seeing it on the Everest. It isn't a new phenomenon. I started my career in tourism with the English Tourist Board back in 1974, and this was the first book I was given. It was called Blessing or Blight, Tourism, Blessing or Blight, and lovely image at the bottom of some city guy telling his mate, don't worry, we'll soon have all this cleared and some decent hotels built. So if you think it's new, it certainly isn't. And the questions that we posed back in 1974 were very good questions. Do we know how to control and direct the growth of travel? Are we certain we want to continue to do that? How can the saturation of some of these popular spots be prevented? I don't think we've ever really thoroughly gone through all of those questions and answered them as an industry. And as we know, the problem is probably getting worse, not better. And I would argue, therefore, it's a model that fails to recognize physical limits. This is not an AI picture, actually. I was using this picture in 2015, long before AI came along. But it does really say it all. Tourism does involve the movement of physical bodies in space within a finite time. It relies on an infrastructure, this gondola building here, which is obviously fictitious, but anyway, that's the infrastructure, it's physical infrastructure. But at the same time, that infrastructure is made possible by nature. Nature is holding it up. That tree is holding up that gondola. And if we mistreat nature, then we are going to experience the consequences. And so it was Kenneth Boulding in the 1940s who said, anyone who believes exponential growth can continue forever is either mad or an economist. And I think those statements are still true. We are still assuming in tourism that we can just get bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's why we really need to start to rethink our purpose. Our root cause of this challenge is that we don't understand how the world really works. We have framed tourism as a very powerful, effectively powerful, efficient, well-organized industry. It's become an industrial machine. I would argue that the destination actually, in many cases, with the mass movement of people coming in, moving around, going out, is operating as much like a conveyor belt. And I use these images just to get us thinking afresh, thinking differently. And we did that because we were always seeking, as a sector, as an activity, we were seeking economic legitimacy. We wanted our own satellite account. And in order to do that, we had to show that we were as sophisticated as manufacturing, which was the dominant source of income generation at the time. So that's why experiences did become products that could be packaged and sold as commodities. And I would argue in many cases that is exactly what's happening. Travelers became consumers who could be profiled and segmented, again, put into boxes, identified, defined. Hosts became suppliers, again, segmented according to their function or their product. Travel agents became retailers, tour operators became wholesalers, and this is where I think we really went wrong. Places became destination, these conveyor belts of attractions and services. Now, I'm painting obviously what some would say is a negative picture, but I think it's a fairly accurate one. What I'm trying to get us to do as a group is come to a different understanding of how we see tourism. And this is the evidence that I'm using, that this is in fact the model that we've been using. The UNWTO perspective of a complex value chain with all these lovely neat boxes of functions and activities and so on that seem to work in sort of linear fashion from one to the other and so on. They give the impression that we can manage this, quote, industry, that we can control it in some way, that we can police it, that we can set policies and so on, when in actual fact, it's much more of a very, very messy living network, which is why so many of our efforts at becoming, quote, sustainable are not working. It's also a sector that's driven by the needs of a few. There are some aspects of tourism that do need to continue to grow, especially in the transportation business, where you've got very heavy investment in planes and trains and cruise ships and so on to move from A to B. And you need constantly to be updating that infrastructure. And that's very expensive. That requires a lot of debt. That requires a lot of growth. So most of the growth at the moment that I see, and this chart is one we're all very familiar with from the date of my birth almost, right the way through to, in this case, 2018, of continuous expansion every year. And even now, IATA is projecting a growth of something in the order of 3 to 7% throughout Europe. But this is where much of that drive is coming from. And the other point that I guess I'm trying to make as well is that here's this global multi-trillion-dollar quote industry, and we tend to generalize about it. I would argue there are, in fact, two forms of tourism out in the world today. The image on the left is the one that is probably the one that's shaping most public policies, government policies, the public understanding of mass tourism and so on. This is the aspect that largely is the big hotel brands, the big international tour operators, the airline companies and so on, the ones that are really very, very dependent on growth. This is what I call the extractive part of tourism. It loves to scale. It likes to replicate and scale up any successful activity. It focuses on the need to standardize and homogenize its operating systems. Efficiency, quantity, and yield are really important. Becoming price competitive is absolutely essential. Nearly all the ownership of that aspect of the industry is private, it's concentrated. And again, it likes top-down decision-making and so on. That aspect of tourism in Europe accounts for less than 5% of the businesses in Europe. On the other hand, we have the other aspect of tourism or hospitality. These are 95% of the businesses are small. They are localized. They're in places. They're connected to the place. They rely on the people who live all around them, their own community, for their support. The type of business, the buildings they live in, operate in, the way they serve their customers are very much shaped by the customs and physiology or nature of the place in which they're based. They are not in a desperate need to go and get bigger and bigger and bigger every year. They just want a stable business that they can see grow and that they can pass on some equity to their children when they pass on. They're often privately owned. The decision making is very bottom up. So you've got these two industries, one which is really influencing government policy and perception, the other one which is reality. It's this other side, this localized hospitality form of tourism, that is the one that is really going to be on the forefront of all regenerative activity. Okay, but tourism doesn't operate in isolation. Tourism is a system, and like all systems, it exists within a larger system, the system called humanity or the global economy or society at large. And we're at a crossroads as well. We now know that sustainability, in other words, doing less harm, isn't working. We've exceeded, we need 3 planets to support our lifestyle, our standard of living. We've exceeded now, it's not 6 of the 9 planetary boundaries that the Stockholm Resilience Institute identified. It's now 7, so things are getting worse. We are now getting words such as collapse, such as the great unraveling being used quite commonly in general parlance at the moment. People are aware we're in trouble. The reason I use this particular diagram is that, again, this is a report that came out by the Post-Carbon Institute. The point I want to draw your attention to here is, how do we cope with these problems? And what I'm trying to show to you is we have a certain way of seeing the world and dealing with the world. We like to define our problems, list our problems. So we tend to think that these 11 issues on the board there that are covered in that particular report can all be studied independently of one another. The big thing that's changed in the last 2 to 3 years is the public awareness and the political admission that we cannot look at any of these individually anymore. We cannot have a COP on climate for 20 odd years, separate from a COP on biodiversity. All of these so-called risks or issues are utterly interconnected and interdependent. Our world has become excessively complex and difficult to manage, and we have to see that in tourism as well. So we now have to have a name. Obviously, that gives us some degree of comfort. It's not just a whole series of risks. It's what we call a polycrisis. But again, the awareness has dawned on the senior people that are really, really, quote, in charge or thinking about these things, that it's now a polycrisis whereby each of those individual crises is starting to affect the other and are compounding. And if that wasn't enough, more recently, finally, we have a new word for what we're experiencing, and that is a metacrisis. And what they mean by a metacrisis, and this is important because we're now starting to get to the root cause of our issues, which are not these individual problems by themselves, but there is a root cause. And that root cause actually is in our minds. It's in our heads. It's how we see the world. And we're realizing that we can't keep tinkering at the edges. We can't keep doing change by doing things a little bit differently if we continue to see the world in the same way. A shift in behaviors will not be enough if we don't shift the way we understand as human beings who we are living on this planet Earth and how is this planet Earth operating at the same time. So that's why I like to say that Einstein was right. He basically said just what I said. It's all in our heads. The world we have created, we've created this world that we're living in, this complex, interconnected world. It cannot be changed unless we changed our thinking. So the root cause, and this is Fritjof Capra's work, is a crisis in what he calls perception. We have fundamentally misunderstood who we are and how we need to operate together, work together, be together on this planet if we're going to get out of the problems we're in. And that's why I argue that a metacrisis is calling for such a deeper level of change. And that's where regeneration and regenerative tourism come in, because it brings another way of seeing the world, being in the world, understanding our role in the world. So big that, in fact, it's as big almost as a caterpillar transforming into a butterfly. And that's important because when that happens, when you do suddenly really at a profound level begin to understand your relationship with life, with each other, with the natural world around you, fundamentally differently, there's no going back. That's the kind of change of thinking we want. And although sometimes you might wake up one day and get it or see something and say, yeah, I get it now, that's true. This process takes time. And we're being asked now in the tourism sector to make that level of change in a relatively short period of time. And what I ask each and every one of you to be patient with it. Be patient with yourselves, be patient with each other. Don't go around pointing the fingers and saying, well, he doesn't get it and she doesn't get it. No, that's not going to be helpful. What we're really going to need to know is start to really care and support one another in this endeavor. So basically what we're talking about is shifting the way we see the world, and that is why the word paradigm is used. And again, what I'm trying to do today is just give you a very quick, if you like, context for this regenerative work, because you'll often hear this word paradigm thrown around. A paradigm is that bundle of beliefs and values and assumptions about the world that we each have internalized. We've been receiving parts of that from the day almost that we started to sit on our parents' lap. They've been telling us how the world works, whether it's hostile, whether it's friendly, whether what I should do in order to get ahead in life, or how to behave with each other, etc. But we're getting that, and often we've internalized it that we're not even aware of what those values and assumptions are. There are different words for it. Sometimes you can use it word mindset or worldview. The point is, it's really important when we come together in groups that we spend a bit of time listening to each other, sharing our thoughts so that we can see how our paradigms may or may not differ. If you don't, what happens is you become aware of them. If you're having a big argument with somebody and you realize that they just haven't a clue what you're trying to say, it's very possible that they have certain assumptions internalized that are different to yours. So again, part of this process of regeneration is spending time really listening to each other and sensing and putting judgment aside, just being in the present and listening to what we're each trying to communicate. Because the most important thing is when we change our way of seeing ourselves and the world, everything else does change. We wake up, we see things differently, and that immediately will affect what we value, what becomes important to us. And that will in turn affect what we decide to do in a particular situation or in our lives. So I'm emphasizing this because I don't think most people who are jumping on the regenerative bandwagon at the moment really have understood just how big this, not only how big this is, but how big it needs to be if we're going to be able to make this transition effectively. So I'm rushing an awful lot of material here. I'm just trying to keep an eye on the time. But at the moment, to simplify it, and all as I say, bear with me, because all we can do is try and give you a roadmap of the nature of this change. I'm not going to be able to go into all the detail. That we will learn in our own individual and collective way over a period of time. But I am trying to give you just a sort of map of what it looks like. And it's really quite simple. For the last 300 or 400 years since the Industrial Revolution, we have tended to assume that the world is a neat sort of physical place, a hunk of rock hurtling through space, made up of resources, things that work like machines or can be made to work like machines. They're physical objects that we can observe objectively. In other words, it's the way it is. And that our purpose is to survive on this. These parts that we identify, and we're constantly trained, aren't we? When we're in university or at school, we're trained to define what we're talking about. What that means, we define, we confine, we separate it. We're trained to think of things as objects, put them in boxes like that box of the UNWTO I showed you before. We think that it's a harsh word of scarcity and only the fittest will survive. We also think this is a world in which humans are superior and we have the right to extract and dominate the rest of life on planet Earth. Now, these are overstatements, oversimplified statements, I agree, but I'm trying to get the general pattern for you. The emerging pattern that is enabling us to start talking about regeneration is that current science and our awareness of what Indigenous people have never forgotten is that we're not living on a hunk of rock. We are not physical objects. We are, in fact, all energy. We're not separate from each other. Everything is connected to everything else. This presentation this morning, this Interreg project is connected to everything else that's going on and will have a knock-on and impactful, I should say, effect. So we now live in a living planet. Life is is going on around us all the time. We don't live on nature. We don't even live in it. We don't live off it, from it. We are nature. And the more we begin to understand how nature works, how the natural systems work, because we are on a living planet, living beings on a living planet, the more likely we are to be able to work with the rest of life to support what life does every day and to recreate a whole different way of being on planet Earth together. So if you're confused, join the club. We're all confused. We're living in between two paradigms. One that has dominated our thinking, dominated the way we've structured our lives on this planet, dominated our politics, dominated our economy. That big system, whatever name you want to give to it, is now crumbling. It's gone past its sell-by date, as they say, and it is in gradual decline because many of the assumptions on which it was based are proven not to be either true or to be effective. So we have a dominant system in decline, and we have another one that's emerging from the compost, if you like, of that dying system. So that's why you will find the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, we happen to have the privilege of being on planet Earth at the moment, are going to be confusing because we're in transition from one to another. We're all going to play different roles. Some of us are pioneers trying to create new ideas of a different world. Many have been working individually. Now those little dots in the top of that picture are starting to, these dots up here, the pioneers, some of them are beginning to join up. And it's in that process of joining up that a new emergent system will come forth. But anyone that can tell you right now, they know exactly what form that's going to take, is probably deluding themselves. We're in the middle of the mess. So this is actually where I think we are now. We're all earnestly trying to get across to the star we all have a North Star. And what do we want? We want a society that's fair, that is regenerative, that takes care of people and nature and so on. That's what we're looking at, and we're here earnestly going up on our way towards it. What we often don't realize is maybe this isn't the route that we're going to have to take. And I'm saying this right now because I believe that a lot of people are using the word regeneration, but they are misunderstanding it. And I think this is absolutely vital for this program for us. As we know, we've been aware as humanity that, let's assume this is humanity going along this horizontal line here. In the 60s, we realized, oops, we were doing lots of great things. Industry was booming. We were producing all kinds of new things that made life more comfortable, from cars to planes to, refrigerators, etc. But at the same token, people like Rachel Carson pointed out that we were also doing quite a bit of harm and that we needed to do less harm. That was the birth, in a sense, of the sustainability movement. The sustainability movement initially was designed to enable us to do the things that enabled us to live a sustainable life on this planet, for all of nature to carry on being healthy and move forward. Unfortunately, over time, it's kind of got twisted to sustaining the current system that we have of producing and consuming, and not necessarily doing as much to sustain the natural living system on which we depend it. But nevertheless, sustainability can be summarized as doing less harm. And, those who like math thought we could actually get to a point of net zero where we didn't do any harm at all. That clearly isn't possible. So gradually over time, what has happened, I would say, in the last literally 10, 12 years, we began to realize that wasn't going to be enough. We needed to start now to give something back and to do some good. And the reason I've got this orange arrow here is I would argue that nearly all of our work, including what we're calling regeneration, is actually still here. We're still trying to maintain the current system, the economic, social systems that we have, and ensure that we actually now start to make them better, that we leave places better than we found them, that kind of idea. But that is good. It means we're repairing, we're restoring, we're trying to improve the quality of what we do. We're trying to look at the social, cultural aspects of what we do, as well as the environmental aspects. We're looking in tourism at distributing the benefits more evenly. All of this is very, very important, but it isn't regeneration per se. It isn't going to be enough. In other words, we are here somewhere. This is either the chasm that we've got to go down and climb up out of, or it's a wall we're walking into. And this is important for this project, because I think during the course of the next 2 years, we're going to need to go much, much deeper into what regeneration really requires. And it requires that big change of understanding, that paradigm shift. That means moving from this machine story to this new living systems story. And again, all I can do today is give you the kind of headlines. So regeneration, as I understand it, and people like Oscar and Loretta and others who are with us today, we understand that it is because we know we're on a living planet, and regeneration is what life does. It's not a thing. It's a process. It's a verb. It's a way of seeing, being, and doing that applies to living systems, not to machines. And what does life do? Well, every aspect of life is creating the conditions for life to thrive. It's that simple. If you came away with nothing else this morning, come away with that one, because our actions then can revitalize it, bring life back to what was dying or degenerating. It's also about bringing things that are broken and fractured and separate and bringing them and making them whole again, making our relationship with each other whole and healthy, making our relationship with the natural world whole and healthy. So therefore, it is the systems change that we need. It's developing a capability to learn how to thrive and evolve together. And that's why this project in Europe right now is so important and so big. And really, if you wanted the simple diagram to show you what does it actually entail, I think this sums it up. We've come out of an industrial system, an economic system of human pride, hubris, ego. We saw ourselves as the top dog and top of nature, really important. We could control it, we could extract from it. That's where we were. Now we're perhaps moving into a more humble stage where we begin to realize that, we're part of nature. We must take care of her. We must look after her. We are there in nature, as if you like, conserving and managing. That's our eco awareness that's growing. But again, regeneration is taking us one step further. And that is seeing ourselves as actually not being just another species. We are a keystone species. And we now need to think about our role as stewards and as caretakers of this amazingly complex life that we're in. So that's why I'm showing this diagram, because I'm asking you to acknowledge that for us to be truly regenerative, we're going to have to either climb this wall, go through the wall, go under it, or whatever, but change our thinking to become truly regenerative. So recognize you're at the beginning of a very long but wonderful journey. All right, so I've talked nonstop now for, I think, over 40 minutes or so, 30, 40 minutes. I thought it would be probably helpful if we could now share just an example of a project, because regeneration and regenerative thinking can be applied to your lives. It can be applied to a project. It can be applied to, in this case, a resort along a coastline. I chose this one. It comes out of Mexico. but it is a coastal resort that has been built on the idea of how it could give back to the health of this particular place. And that has matured amazingly in the last 10 years. It's a resort called Playa Viva. Many of you may have heard of it. It's on the Mexican coastline in the state of Guerrero. It started out as just a dream of a guy who wanted to build a glamping resort. In other words, a high-end sort of camping resort to take advantage of that beautiful beach and the environment. But it's now evolved into a highly complex, very effective resort that has moved all the way up the coast. So here it is, the Playa Viva. It's on the coastline here. It's on a river. It sits outside what was an impoverished village. So impoverished that the local municipal authorities suggest they built a road around it, whereas the resort made sure that the road came pretty well through it. It's on this particular river all the way up to the mountains, and the impact of this one resort now is spreading to revitalize all of this watershed. So,
before we get into the story, let's take a look at the project's stakeholders. First, there are the founders. David, a marketing director from the west coast of the US.
I can't hear.
And his wife at the time, Sandra. To set up his resort, David needed investment. Initially, he borrowed from friends and family, which enabled him to build the first tree houses. Then he raised impact investment from specialized funds for a total of $2.5 million. Now the Earth. We're in the state of Guerrero on the coast. It's fertile land, but degraded by 80 years of coconut palm monoculture. It's also home to lagoons, forests, mangroves, turtles, and pelicans. The customers are mainly rich American tourists who can afford the all-inclusive offers at between $300 and $600 a night. Some come for yoga retreats, others are inspired by the promise of a more eco-friendly holiday. In contrast, they could have chosen an all-inclusive holiday in one of the multiple resorts further down the coast, which would have been much cheaper, but that would be supporting a form of tourism that has devastating effects on the soil, biodiversity, and the economy of the local regions. Finally, there are the local communities. David's project is in Jurichuca, where the economy is mostly fishing and agriculture, rather than tourism. Today, David has brought together his team and the 2 members of Regenesis, who helped him design this project 15 years ago. On the left is Tim Murphy, and on the right, Bill Reed, who was involved right from the start.
First thing I want to talk about is, one of the stories I tell is when I first talked to Bill, my ex-wife had talked to him and was like all excited about doing this thing called regeneration. And I, heard about it. I was like, this is bullshit, absolute bullshit. Anytime you build, you destroy.
Together, they decided to build a resort that wouldn't destroy anything. And the starting point was quite different from the usual business plan with its quantitative objectives for numbers of rooms and customers. They took the time to get to know the place.
This is the other way around. This was, we are going to do studies of the geology, the archaeology, the anthropology, the soils, the flora, the fauna, the water, the people, the history, spoken word history, how the whole place works as a whole and how it integrates into the community.
That was the first thing that we needed to do, is to understand this place as an organism. And that includes the people. Every aspect of life in a place makes a place who it is, not what it is, but who it is.
The question is no longer just, how do I set up my business, but how can my business serve the vocation of this place?
We had a topographic map done of the site, and it showed that it actually was terraced, and that there was something here that was not only utilitarian agricultural, but something that was largely ceremonial as well, that had the typical orientation to the sky.
This approach revealed the presence of an Aztec site on the top of the hill, as well as risks of earthquakes, avalanches, and erosion along the beach.
In that process of laying down the geology map and the archaeology and all those maps, you get a multi-layered map, which then says, here's what this place needs. Here's what's ideal for this place.
Initially, David had imagined his resort on the top of the hill, like the Aztecs, but through the process, his plans changed radically. To honor this place, Playa Viva would be built near the sea and the resort designed to help the dunes resist erosion.
We realized that we could build tree houses with the palm trees to begin to allow the root systems of these palms to hold the barrier dune together. And that was the beginning of continual process of not just compromising, but how do we harmonize with life?
This is the original jet, as we call it. This is our real first tree house where it's built up in the trees. We did a bunch of tests early on what are the best ways to connect to the trees. And you can see this is simple. You know, these are just bolts going through it that don't impact the trees in a negative way. These 4 trees will become the basis for an entire treehouse.
15 years later, the resort has evolved in keeping with the initial design principles. The magic of this design is that the more the resort develops, the more the roots of the palm trees grow and protect against soil erosion.
So with each construction we do, we learn and improve. And that's part of the regenerative development process is you don't just boom, do it all at once.
And that's not all. David has also designed energy systems that make the most of the site.
We are 100% off-grid solar. So we're not engaged in the kind of dirty energy that's being made in conjunction between CFE and Pemex. The only time that we do use any carbon is we do have a backup generator that if there's cloudy days or whatever, we're not making enough energy, kicks on.
And these common sense choices start to have an effect on the holidaymakers.
Well, you know, one thing I want to point out is the hot water. For example, you know, we're not using carbon to heat hot water. These are fairly common and available technologies. All of our hot water is heated by the sun. So, you know, take as long a hot water shower as you want, right? You're not expending any carbon on it. The negative side is, you know, when it rains here, you may not get a hot shower.
Hot water only when the sun shines, no air conditioning, no fridges in the rooms. It's a far cry from a regular 4-star hotel. But for Jan, this experience is far more luxurious.
The rooms are incredible here. They're beautifully designed, and we look at every little detail here as magical, right down to every little pebble, you know, that's been placed. So there's no need for AC the way things are designed. The air flows through everything correctly because it's been well thought out.
The place and the architecture are beautiful, but David wants to make sure his customers experience a deeper transformation.
The experience that they gave all my friends last week changed their lives personally. They went home, they wrote me letters, they said, blindly, some of them came here just because I thought it was a wonderful place to be, and they had an experience that will help them in the future, that gave them thoughts about where are my goals next, what's my purpose, and they were transformed by having their week here.
What could be better to accompany deep transformation than amazing local food? David has invested in a farm to create a farm-to-table offering for his customers.
You may not think that farm is a good investment, but as a hotelier, people come and stay at Playa Viva and they go, wow, this is amazing. And then they go out to the farm and they come back and they go, oh my God, I didn't realize what you were doing fully until I went out on the farm. But again, that's part of how we create a guest engagement that increases repeat business, increases loyalty and connection to place. And it goes beyond the farm.
The farm made David realize that his project could also respond to another challenge in this place, water scarcity. He asked Amanda, a permaculture specialist, to create the conditions for water to come back.
And we were only 35 meters above the ocean, but this completely encircles that space. Because this is our highest spot, then an impermeable surface was put on top of it. And so any water that hits here goes flying down this hillside. When I got here, there were crevasses in this direction that took all the organic material and all the water with it, which is why the lagoon back at the farm was kind of filling up with sediment, you could call it. When we put in this swale, we planted this line of trees right here behind Arno. There's kind of 2 or 3 species, because the water that we capture here, gravity is gonna send it to the lagoon. We want it to move slowly. We want to capture it in this tree and then use it again or harvest it from the organic material that the tree is providing us. And we're planting and harvesting water through some of this work.
5 years later, and the water is back. The soils have been improved. The farm provides a third of the resort's food and has also contributed to the wealth of the wider region.
And we look at the farm as a whole systems thinking. From a permaculture perspective, you would think the social, the economic, and the ecological facets of the program need to be kind of raised and developed together. The role of the farm now, not only for Playa Viva, but for the state of Guerrero, is really an agro-tourism site. We receive between 100 and 200 local students from the community who use the space as an education center. We use the space as a training center for international students.
And the regenerative dynamic has spread. In the neighboring villages, 6 women have created a cooperative that sells herbs and flowers.
Todo lo que ven aquí viene del huerto y todo es procesado por manos de mujeres y básicamente todos los ingredientes que ven aquí los utilizamos para nuestros tés medicinales que empezamos a producir hace 1 año aproximadamente. Pues para mí la idea sería como incluir a muchísimas más mujeres, pero también como ya teniendo centro, que fuera un centro de agregación. Entonces entender que las mujeres en sus casas pudieran tener sus propios proyectos y que ya no fuera tanto como todas de nosotras ir a Playa Viva y trabajar en el huerto de Playa Viva, sino más bien trabajar en nuestros propios huertos en la comunidad y no solo en Juluchuca, sino en toda la cuenca. Para mí ese sería como el futuro de...
David realised that his sphere of influence extended beyond the site of the resort and over the hill to encompass the whole watershed. So he co-founded Resimar, a bioregional network that brings together local players to work on 5 themes: permaculture, water quality, reforestation, marine life, and education. A team of local volunteers like Diego have saved more than 500,000 baby turtles since 2010.
Porque los animalitos pues no se defienden. Llegan los animalitos, cangrejos, mapaches, tejones. Entonces, hay unos chochitos y se las comen. Y así nosotros esperamos que salgan las tortugas, las llevamos adentro del mar y para que se vayan para adentro ya, para que se liberen más.
People staying at Playa Viva can visit the turtle sanctuary and take part in their work.
You know, the turtle sanctuary here and the release of baby turtles. For people that come and release baby turtles, it's a transformational experience. It's a, wow, this changed my life. For them to see, that is the turtle sanctuary person, seeing the reaction of somebody seeing this for the first time, they realize how special their place is just from that reaction. It goes a lot deeper than that, but that's one that I've just discovered. So you talk about my transformation, it comes, you know, from little discoveries like that.
Resimar also supports young people to develop new capabilities so that they can become active citizens and help regenerate their region.
Entonces, junto con las maestras decidimos que es mucho mejor empezar a desarrollar un programa regenerativo, pero enfocado en habilidades que a ellos les falta como fortalecer. Matemáticas, comprensión de lectura, pero metimos 2 materias muy importantes que son habilidades socioemocionales y también educación ambiental. Entonces, se hace una mezcla, estamos apoyándonos el programa sintético de la SEP, que es la institución oficial del gobierno,
Y a partir de eso, de las mañanas, yo voy a las escuelas, les enseño un poco de estas habilidades, se los enseño a través del juego, se los enseño a través de la participación, empezar como a involucrarse en gobernanza.
Playa Viva customers are invited to invest in an education initiative called Adopt a Student.
Entonces, es un programa donde los huéspedes de Playa Viva hacen un donativo para que los estudiantes tengan un apoyo escolar durante un año. Entonces, se les apoya con uniformes, almuerzo, inscripciones y también con gasolina para los que bajan de la montaña. Es como un programa de becas que sí ha facilitado que las familias tengan una visión mucho más relajada del futuro, donde sus hijos tengan todavía la intención de seguir estudiando, de seguir creciendo. Y pues la verdad sí es un reto constantemente porque
By thinking about the ecosystem as a whole, David enables his customers to change their role. From simple consumers, they can become co-investors in Resimar.
Estamos creando vehículos para replicar lo que se está haciendo aquí. Para los inversionistas creo que es muy importante, porque inversionistas no invierten una vez, reciben un retorno, quieren reinvertir. Quieren saber que su inversión está teniendo un impacto local positivo, generando un retorno económico, pero también creando oportunidades nuevas en otros lugares. Y eso es exactamente lo que está pasando aquí.
Today, Resimar is an inspiration for other bioregions in Mexico, and the Playa Viva customers can't get enough of this approach.
Playa Viva attracts travelers who want an experience that is reciprocal of place. They may not be able to define it that way, but when they come here and they have that, and how are they going to have that? I mean, our goals here is different than most all-inclusive resorts. We don't want people to stay here. We want people to interact with that wider area, to get out on the farm, to get out into the community, to get up into the watershed, to get out into the ocean. And the deeper they go, the more connected they are to place. And again, that drives them to want to come back.
The aspirations of his customers have helped David think bigger, beyond the Playa Viva project.
You know, as a business person, you're like, boom, business idea, opportunity, people want more of this, and they can't just come to Playa Viva all the time. And that's where regenerative travel came from. Bring travelers in here. We need to bring travel designers and travel agents into here and create a bigger ecosystem. So, you know, it grows beyond you, and learning to let that go. And what it can do to, because, you know, now regenerative travel becomes an engine for Playa Viva, but for all the travelers that are now seeking that, and becomes a transformational agent in the marketplace.
By starting with the vacation of the place, David revealed his customers' deeper aspirations. He's contributed to a holistic ecological and social regeneration of the watershed, whose effects now ripple out.
We cannot save the world. The world is too big. It's too abstract. There's no CEO in charge. What we can do is save our places. Now, what's a place? The place is here.
So what might be your place? Do you know it intimately from the geology up? How big is here? And have you explored your customers' deeper aspirations?
That film was probably made 3, 4, 5 years ago. I had the privilege of visiting Playa Viva last year, and so many more things have happened since. The what was a permacultural garden just outside the property, or is now a full-blown farm. It has enabled the creation by local women of a very powerful cooperative. There are now many women working together, forming this cooperative to farm it, to grow different crops, which is generating quite a lot of income for their own families, but also for the property itself. It's constantly changing, constantly moving. And I wanted you to see that film just for the variety of things that can happen when you really start to bed into a place. What's coming next? We will start to sort of give you broad brush strokes of what might be a regenerative curriculum, things to learn. Basically understanding the paradigm, nature's principles, which we can all learn to observe every day in our lives. We'll look at it in terms of your purpose of your project, its potential, the impact, most importantly, on the people who are involved in it, how regeneration is about growing people as much as it is about growing places and restoring ecosystems. How we can learn to really understand the nature of place, like as Phil said, who is this place that we're in right now? But what I really wanted to do was inspire you as well.